Get strong.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's The Beautiful Bag podcast. This week, I have a beautiful guest. And again, like always, I've met her on Instagram. Molly Ostomy is how she goes on Instagram. So if you want to look her up, and we're going to talk about that for a while, but she is a 20-something learning how to live life in an ostomy. And, as a younger woman, it's going to be a great story for all of you out there. So Molly, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm so excited.
I am too. I am too. I love learning people's stories, and I've loved following you along your journey, through how you share so openly on Instagram of all the struggles that you go through and what your daily life is like. So let's jump right into it. What's your story?
Yeah, everybody's got a story. Mine is a little bit different from most of the ostomy stories you hear. The majority of ostomy stories that I hear, especially in this age demographic, either cancer, colorectal cancer, and bladder cancer too. There's some people with urostomies as well, or inflammatory bowel disease. So that's Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. So I actually have neither of those. I was born with chronic constipation. My parents discovered it like day one that I was home from the hospital. I let out this piercing shriek and they thought that they'd stuck me with a pin, but it was actually just me trying to have my first bowel movement. And so they took me to all sorts of GIs from the time that I was 6 months old, a month, all the way kind of monthly throughout my childhood to figure out what was going on. And the consensus was that I just had constipation and it would resolve itself as typical constipation does in normal children. So a lot of fiber and activity and making sure I was hydrated and all that sort of thing. So throughout my childhood and pretty well into middle school, the only way that I could have a bowel movement was relying on laxatives. The one that I can remember the most distinctly were suppositories or Senecot, which tastes like Hershey's chocolate syrup. And I still to this day cannot eat Hershey's chocolate syrup. But that kind of took me into middle school and high school. And around middle school and high school, I kind of figured out how to regulate my body with diet and exercise so that even though it wasn't great, I could try to have as normal a bowel movement as I possibly could. So that kind of took me into college. And again, I was limping along, not super regular or anything, but enough to stay out of my doctor's office. And then everything hit the fan when I was a senior in college. I was training for a race with my then boyfriend, now fiance. We were gonna fly out to Dallas, Texas, where he was in school, do the race, have a great weekend. And I woke up on one of the mornings of training, like the week before, and I thought I had food poisoning. I felt awful, was having tons of diarrhea. And at that point, I was maddish that I'd missed a day of training. I had no idea that it would continue, which it did, and eventually just turned to straight blood. So at that point, I ended up in the ER and they did all the tests that they normally do. And they came back and said, "We think you have Crohn's disease." So I went into my colonoscopy pretty much accepting that I had some form of inflammatory bowel disease. My colon was entirely ulcerated and inflamed. And I have 2 first cousins that have Crohn's disease. So it wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility. And after they did the scope and everything there, they came back and said, "Yep, we're like 90% sure that this is what you have. Let's get you on steroids. Let's get you on a biologic." So all those orders were sent in. And then they came back a couple days later and said, "Scratch that. The biopsies don't show anything. We don't know what this is. We know that you're sick as a dog, but let's figure out what's going on." So for that hospitalization, I was in the hospital for 13 days and left with no clear diagnosis. They kind of said, "Go home, the inflammation will die down, and you'll be back up and running in a couple weeks." But what we neglected to tell them in the hospital, because we were so worried about the inflammation, was all of my bowel irregularity. So that really was never discussed at that point. But it turns out that whatever form of colitis that I had really was the straw that broke the camel's back and kind of shut down my digestive system for the long run. So even though they said that after a couple of weeks I would be back up and completely feeling normal, I wasn't. I was in a lot of pain. I wasn't regular. So went to the GI who diagnosed me in the hospital, and he said it's not Crohn's disease. I don't think it's Crohn's disease, but you're past my scope. Like, let's send you to a research hospital. So at that point, I ended up at VCU, which is the research hospital associated with VCU in Richmond, Virginia, and saw a guy who sees Crohn's disease from 9 to 5 every single day. And he took a look at me and he said, "It's not Crohn's. I see it all the time, but something is wrong with you. So let's figure that out." So he sent me for an x-ray like in that appointment. And 20 minutes later, we found out that I had 5.5 feet of stool that was sitting in my colon, up into my small intestine, and even into my stomach. So he was like, "Wow, that's why you don't feel great."
Yeah.
It was a wild ride, especially doing all of the tests and that sort of thing as a senior in college, because trying to juggle classes and trying to get to different appointments and just all of that uncertainty around what was actually going on. So all of that kind of happened like January, February of 2017. At the end of 2017, at the end of 2017, the end of college in 2017. So May-ish, I went to my GI, and based on the tests that they'd done, we determined that my colon and rectum had anatomical and functional abnormalities. So
Okay.
the muscles weren't working right, and the structure of both organs just wasn't the way that it should be. He scheduled me for a consultation with a colorectal surgeon. We originally thought that it was going to be just a resection, take out the piece that was bad, sew it back up, right as rain. So I graduated on a Sunday, and 23 hours later, I was in my colorectal surgeon's office and learned that it wasn't going to be a resection, it was going to be an ileostomy. So that was, talk about like getting the wind knocked out of you. I had no idea what an ileostomy was. I didn't know. All I knew was that like people who have digestive system issues can end up with a bag, and what does that mean? Am I going to smell bad all the time? Am I going to wake up and suddenly be 65? It was definitely a big mental whoa. Like, what does this mean? So about a month after I learned that I needed an ileostomy, I underwent ileostomy surgery, got my temporary, named him Ollie, so that he and I were buds. And then the following year, I removed my colon because it wasn't doing any good just sitting there. And I had an emergency revision 6 months after that. That's pretty much it surgery wise and like GI wise. But in the course of figuring out that my colon wasn't working, we actually figured out why that piece wasn't working, as well as some other body issues that I have always had. Like, my hands are always cold. I'm always cold. I pass out if I go from sitting to standing too fast. So once the fire was out in my digestive system, we kind of were able to step back and see, like, there are other things going on. What's the cause of this? So after that, we discovered that it's all tied back to a condition called generalized hypermobility spectrum disorder. It's a variant of a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is related to like joint hypermobility and that sort of thing. It's not really, really well known. It's getting more well known, thankfully, because it takes forever to diagnose. It's just all the symptoms could be something, but they also could just be growing up or like not having enough hydration or anything like that. But what it really has done in my body is it's a collagen deficiency disorder, which means the building blocks in my body should have collagen to keep them really structurally sound. But because of this disorder, my collagen is more like Jello blocks instead of like Lego.
Instead of the ligaments that it should be, because that's what it's the skeletal building blocks of your entire body is what collagen is. Yeah. I interviewed a girl just a couple of weeks ago that has the same thing.
Yeah, it affects everything from your skin to your veins to your joints to your organs. So that's why most people who have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome are double jointed. So like my elbows bend back in a weird direction. I can dislocate parts of my body that really shouldn't be dislocated. But when it comes to my digestive system, because my collagen is so floppy, it makes all of the organs in my body super floppy as well. So if a normal person's colon was like a PVC pipe and you could just push Play-Doh through it and it would kind of keep its shape, my colon is kind of like pushing Play-Doh through a wet spaghetti noodle, where you can kind of get a little bit of traction, but it's not really gonna form the way that it's supposed to. And even if it does get all the way through, it's gonna get trapped and all that sort of thing. So that was a wild discovery, but it explains so much of all the conditions and all the symptoms that I have been living with for my whole life and just had no idea that they had an underlying cause.
Exactly. Now, do they have you on like any collagen supplements? I mean, right now there's tons of collagen is like the big thing right now that everybody's taking and using and all that stuff. Do they have you on anything like that?
So with my ileostomy, it's not something that they've really considered just because of the absorption rates. So a lot of the supplements that you can take really would kind of just pass right through.
Mm.
Even though it's a collagen deficiency disorder, taking supplemental collagen is kind of a hit or miss in terms of whether or not it would actually fix a problem.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because ileostomy, I mean, your nutrition's different, everything. Like, how do you get, so you've gone through all this, you've had all these surgeries, you're in an ileostomy, you were trying to figure out, does it stink? Is it going to be horrible? What's life going to be like? Am I going to wake up at 65? I'm a 20 something year old kid. Am I going to be 65 tomorrow when I wake up? I mean, it's a shock to the system.
Yeah.
I hear you. I feel it. I'm much older than you, but I get it when they say all of a sudden you're going to be in an ostomy and you're like, what? Like, no,
Yeah.
no. But so you've had this for a few years. How has life been with it?
All in all, I am so thankful for my ostomy. I didn't really know a time before my ostomy that was stomach pain free. I kind of always assumed that most people just had extreme issues with bowel movements and a ton of pain. And like I was at the point where I would eat a meal and then I would have to go lay on the floor wherever I was just to get things to move and to pass. So all in all, my ostomy has given me a much better quality of life. Of course, right at the beginning, both in terms of just trying to figure out like what supplies worked and how to prevent skin breakdown and making sure that there wasn't going to be a bag leak. The first few months were definitely a struggle, both physically and mentally and emotionally. But once I kind of got the routine of it down, it's just one more step, and it just requires a little bit more forethought. And I mean, everybody has a thing, whether it's an ostomy, whether it's mental health, whether it's, oh, I don't like my nose. Like everybody has something that they have to worry about that nobody else does. And so mine just happens to be a bag. And that's
Yep. No, I love that. And so, I mean, so now you said you love it, right? So life is better because you're not in pain. What other reasons, what other things are make you love it? Like,
yeah.
Are there, what things can you do now that you couldn't do prior?
It's almost less. One of the reasons that I love having my ostomy is less about like what I can do now, because I'm a big believer that anything that you can do without an ileostomy, you can do with one. You can just do it while you're pooping at the same time. But I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from living with an ileostomy is just how remarkable the human body is. It's wild to me that I could lose 6 feet of an organ and still have a happy, healthy life. And my body just kind of has adapted to it. So that's pretty incredible to me. And I think the other thing is the ostomy community as a whole is one of the most genuine, supportive communities that I've ever found. It doesn't matter how we get started on this journey, but everyone is so willing and able to support each other, and they want to find the bright spots. They want to find a way for people to reach a stage of acceptance with whatever appliance they require. If that's an ileostomy, if it's a colostomy, if it's a urostomy, if it's a continental diversion, like, it doesn't really matter. It's just a really interesting group of people that you find, because you don't end up with an ileostomy or any sort of ostomy because everything's great. You end up with one because something went wrong and there was a crisis, and this was how you were going to fix it. And so all the people who I've met have gone through some sort of adversity and have come out on the other side, and they may not be the same person that they were before their surgery, but um they are a more humble and empathetic and courageous person for it. And the community is something that I absolutely adore.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've had my colostomy for 5 years. It was 5 years in January. And I mean, I had mine because of cancer, but it's finding, like, in the beginning, I didn't know anybody. Like, I didn't know a single person that had one. And just the community, I don't know about you, but it's Instagram for me is where I have found that massive community of just people supporting each other and talking louder about it and being open about it, so that way we can save more people's lives. Because again, your first reaction was like, is it going to smell? Oh my gosh, like, I don't want this. And the same reaction that I had. And for people to know that it really isn't that bad. I mean, yeah, you might have days where it smells, but most times you're okay.
Exactly.
You know, like most times you're just walking around normal. I don't know about you, but sometimes I even forget I have it.
Same. And I have moments where I'll see pictures of myself without one and be like, that's weird. How did a stomach look without one?
Yeah.
I know you make an excellent point with the whole Instagram thing and feeling alone. I mean, that's why I created my Instagram account. I launched it a week before I had surgery, because when I was doing all sorts of my research before I had my procedure, I couldn't really find anybody who was in my age group living a life that I wanted to see. A lot of the ostomy material is targeted for the demographic that most people have their ostomies. And I think it's 68, but don't quote me on it. But I couldn't find anybody who was in their 20s and having a really vibrant life. And the people that I could find in their 20s had it for one of the more popular is the wrong word, but more common reasons. So mostly IBD, some colorectal cancer, but I couldn't find anybody who just couldn't poop and so required surgery. So that's why I decided to create an Instagram account. It was partially because it was partially selfish, because I didn't want to tell the same story to everybody over and over again. And so by being able to say, go check out this page, and if you have any other questions, let me know, but otherwise keep it there. So it was kind of selfishly a way for me to avoid questioning and kind of get my thoughts out, but also show other people that it was okay to have an ostomy. Um, that's actually the kind of the reason behind the name, Molly Ollie Ostomy. I'm Molly, my ostomy is Ollie. The way that the title sounds, it's like when you play hide and seek, and when it's safe for everybody to come out, you say Ollie Ollie oxen free, and everybody rushes out, and like they know that they're not in danger anymore, for lack of a better term. But I wanted the ability for other people with ostomies and other bowel conditions to be able to come out and be in a safe space and say, like, this is me, this is who I am, I'm not in danger anymore. It may not be cool by a lot of standards, but I think it's pretty cool. So I'm unbelievably blessed to have a platform to kind of spread the good word about ostomies.
I love it. I love it. And I love going on your page because you do. I mean, you post important things. You post like real life, like this is what's going on with me today. I mean, you talk about how you're freezing at night. So you go to bed in sweats and a sweatshirt and everything else. And you wake up in boxer shorts, right? Because your body has a hard time regulating itself, but you share your story so openly, and it must feel refreshing for you too. So that because you can get it out of you. You can tell your story, you can share. And at the same time, you're changing lives. You're helping people. You're helping people. I'm sure you get messages. I mean, I get messages all the time. I get messages a lot about just thank you for sharing your story. I'm going through the similar things and you're making me feel better about the outcome on the other side. I'm way sure you get the same messages from people.
All the time. I get them from patients, I get them from caregivers, I get them from nurses. Huge swath of different people in the ostomy experience and from all over the world. And it is really humbling. One of the things that I kind of decided from the outset was, if this is going to be the worst thing that happens to me, I'm going to make it the best worst thing that happens to me. Like, if I can go through this and make somebody else's experience better, then sign me up. Let's go. I'm ready.
You just filled my cup. You just filled my cup, and I think we've only been chatting for about 20 minutes, and you filled my cup, and I'm sure you filled the entire audience's cup too, as you always do.
Overflows.
Thank you. Same here, sweetheart. Same here. So, is there anything else that, you want to share with the audience?
Is there anything else that I want to share with the audience? I think one of the biggest components of living with an ostomy is mental health and finding a good support system. I am very positive about my ostomy, and I am very positive about it on social media, but I try to be authentic in terms of the struggles, because it's not always unicorns and rainbows when it comes to ostomies. There are bad days when your bag change doesn't go as planned, or you wake up in the middle of the night with a leak, or you get a weird blockage or anything like that. And sometimes it's really helpful to take a step back and give yourself the space to feel all of the emotions, because all of them are valid. All of them are worthy of being felt, even the ones that are anger and sadness and grief and loss. And I'm a huge believer that giving yourself the space to mourn the life that was, and then reach a point of acceptance for the life that is crucial to reaching a point of acceptance for your new normal. It's you don't wallow in it, because that is debilitating, but if you don't give yourself the time and space to feel all the feels, then the more you bottle them up, the harder it's going to be to get over them. And finding a support system that can help you process all of those things is critical for that. If that's your immediate family, if that's your significant other, if that's your really close girlfriends, if that's a support group that you found online, if that's your nurse and your doctor and all your medical team, like, find the people who can lift you up when you're feeling low and sit in the darkness when you need a shoulder to cry on. And life, it feels very lonely with an ostomy when you're going through it, because it's not something that most people can relate to. But if you can find someone who's been through it, or someone who really is good at being that empathetic person, then you are miles and miles ahead of where you could be.
I love that. And typically, and you're right, having that support system is huge. It's huge. I mean, you have your boyfriend, you're still together, your fiance, your family, having that support system. And then, like you said, the online support system has just been huge. And we are all here for each other, whatever that is, whatever anyone is going through, there is that huge family. So, typically my last question is, if you wanted to leave the audience with one thing, what would that one thing be?
What is that one thing? I'm gonna quote one of my really close ostomy friends is you can hide your bag if you're not comfortable sharing it. You can let your freak bag fly if that's your speed, or you can keep it under wraps, but never let your bag hide you. Let yourself be authentic and live your life to the fullest extent possible, because an ostomy, I truly believe an ostomy isn't a death sentence. It is a life sentence. So if that's the only thing you remember from today, please let it be that.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for joining us this week. I know a lot of people are going to be inspired by your story. Everyone, if you want to find Molly, we've said it a few times, Instagram, Molly Ollie Ostomy. You can find her on Instagram. Go follow her. She'll share her story. She shares her story, her daily struggles and her daily life very openly, which is absolutely amazing, especially for your age. I bow to you for that. So thank you so much for being here this week.
Thank you so much, LeeAnne. It's been a real treat.
These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers.